I, as the chair, my members is Corey Penn of District 1 and Benjamin Reynolds of District 4. Also, look like the mics are off. But we also have all the other council members present, our attorney, mayor, chief of staff, city attorney, administration, and Amtrak representatives are with us this afternoon, along with the media and some citizens and the city clerk's office. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to turn this meeting over to Mr. Raymond Lane. He's the vice president of the state supported services of the business development.
Before we do that, can we find out who else is on this thing? See if we can get it fixed.
Hey, could the ones that's on Zoom, could y'all mute y'all phone, mics? Testing 1, 2, 3. Testing. That's it. Mr. Lane.
And I go off mute. Good. Well, good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for having me here. Council President Small, council members, thanks for the time that you've given me today to talk about Amtrak's proposed Gulf Coast passenger rail service. As was said, my name is Ray Lang. I'm the Vice President of State Supported Service Line here at Amtrak, and I'd like to take a moment to acknowledge some of our partners who are here in the room today, particularly members of the Southern Rail Commission, Knox Ross, and some of his colleagues who are in the audience. LaPracia Hayes from the FRA, there she is right there, and several of my colleagues from Amtrak have made it in for the meeting today, and I'm grateful to have them there. And I understand that there are some friends of Amtrak in the audience too. There they are. Great, wonderful. Glad to have them here. Thank you for your continued support. We are all here in front of you today to discuss and answer any questions you have about the status of restoring Amtrak service to Mobile, which I gather by the presence of the cameras here is quite a popular topic of discussion here, and one that we're certainly excited about. Amtrak has been working very diligently with our regional and railroad partners to advance this project. The proposed service will operate twice daily between Mobile and New Orleans, with intermediate stops in Pascagoula, Biloxi, Gulfport, and Bay St. Louis. We last operated into Mobile in 2005, and the service that we ran was suspended after Hurricane Katrina. We've been working collaboratively with Jane and our colleagues at CSX and Norfolk Southern and the port to develop a return to service concept that addresses all parties' input and reflects collaboration on a design that works for both passenger and freight rail service. We've been working diligently with CSX to design and soon construct a new station layover track and boarding platform adjacent to the existing mainline tracks, terminating at the south side of the convention center where the former Amtrak station once stood. This design will ensure that the operation of Amtrak's passenger service will not impact the movement of freight through the port and downtown Mobile. Earlier this month, we were pleased to receive unanimous support for the Mobile Station project from the Board of Adjustment. I was there, testified there as well. In addition to the Mobile Station project, Amtrak, CSX, NS, and the port were awarded a $178.1 million grant from the Federal Railroad Administration for additional improvements along the entire Gulf Coast corridor. This includes $72 million in investment in Alabama, including an extended siding from Brooklyn to downtown and an expanded Virginia Street lead track, both of which are expected to improve rail traffic fluidity just south of the new station. Amtrak and its railroad and port partners look forward to continuing to advance these projects and continue to make investments with your support. In February 2020, the Mobile City Council approved a commitment of just over $3 million towards the operating funding to support the proposed Gulf Coast service. And today we are asking the council to reaffirm that same commitment of $3.048 million, unchanged from 2020, to contribute towards the first 3 years of operating expenses for that service. Amtrak and the Southern Rail Commission are seeking the same funding commitment from Louisiana and Mississippi towards the service, and we've been meeting regularly with both parties to secure that commitment or reaffirm that commitment and execute an operating agreement with those DOTs. Upon completion of the funding and lease agreement negotiations with Mayor Simpson's staff, we hope to bring both agreements to the council for approval. In conversations about the agreement with the mayor's staff, the lease agreement that is, we believe that the current draft of the agreement effectively provides Mobile with pathways for coordination and collaboration should there be any proposals for expansion of this service or any others going to or through Mobile. New or expanded services like the New Orleans Mobile service must be led by a state or local entity. And I want to spend a few minutes sort of highlighting this point. We, Amtrak, are governed by a piece of legislation called PREA, the Passenger Rail Investment and Improvement Act, which was passed in 2008. So it's about 16 years old. That legislation required that all short distance trains around the country be funded by a state or a non-Amtrak entity. Amtrak at the time ran a bunch of short distance corridor trains, some in partnership with states, some not, on different regional corridors around the country. And that legislation changed everything and said, Amtrak, from this point forward, any short distance train corridors in the United States have to be funded by a non-Amtrak entity. In other words, be part of a state transportation plan. And so since that law passed, all new services, all new short distance services that Amtrak operates or proposes to operate have to be funded by a state. So in other words, it flips the paradigm. We don't go to states, states come to us and say, we would like you to run a service on this particular high density or important corridor. And it's been very successful. As of last Tuesday, we have a new state partner, the state of Minnesota. So we now have 21 different governmental partners that pay us to or contract with us to run service on short distance corridors around the country. And we're hopeful and looking forward to having the Gulf Coast states be 22, 23, and 24 in terms of the partners that contract with us to run service. Bringing Amtrak to Mobile offers many benefits to your city's visitors, businesses, and residents. Each day, this train will bring hundreds of visitors right to downtown Mobile and visit the museums and other downtown attractions. Enjoy your restaurants and bars and stay in your hotels. With the proximity to the Mobile Cruise Terminal and the recently expanded services there, many will opt to use the train to begin their cruise trip, which could easily include an overnight stay in your community and your hotels. Having convenient rail service will also be a key feature to continue attracting downtown businesses and making Mobile more accessible to the region. It will now be easier to take a day trip to New Orleans or Mobile, all while being able to enjoy the comfortable ride and free Wi-Fi throughout their journey. We're excited about this opportunity. I've been working on this project for 10, 12 years now. Hope to see it come into being. I'm happy to take any questions you have about our service, our proposed service, our relationship with states around the country, the law that governs us, or our partnership with the Southern Rail Commission. Thank you.
Mr. Reynolds and Mr. Penn, then we'll go to Mr. Carroll, then Mr. Daves, then Mr. Woods, and Vice President Gregory.
Has Alabama, the state of Alabama, come to you and requested this?
Southern Rail Commission was the entity that requested this service to be commenced.
What's the status of the state participating? I guess that's what I'm struggling with.
Sure, yeah. We have two state funding partners that are Mississippi and Louisiana, and then the city of Mobile representing the state of Alabama.
Are you in ongoing discussions with the state getting on board with this?
We are in ongoing discussions with the Southern Rail Commission, who is represented here today. The Southern Rail Commission was created it's an interstate compact, so it's an act of Congress representing the three states. So it's the one entity to represent the three states, which we would contract with in the future. Sure.
Thank you, Mr. President. And just to get clarity, how much did you say the pricing of the ticket might be?
Yeah, that's the million-dollar question, isn't it? So with our state-supported services around the country, and as my name's on most of the contracts for those services, the agreement with the states are the states have the ability, if they so choose, to set the pricing. So in most cases, the states let us choose the pricing, but in some cases, states just have a fixed fee and they choose their own pricing. In other words, they're doing it to get people off the roads generally, and they're not worried necessarily about the operating ratio. They just fund the service and they set depressed fares to attract riders. Other states let us revenue manage the service, which is what we're proposing for here. And revenue management means, in effect, that we have multiple price points and we induce demand through raising and lowering fares. Currently, we have 15 price points on most of our services around the country. We call them RBDs, which stands for Revenue Bucket Distribution. But really what it means is that on peak days, most of the train is available at the higher fares. You're getting the top dollar or the most revenue that you can for each seat mile that you run. Off peak days, we depress the fares and we make seats available at the lowest fare, which is that the pricing department has set up, and we're trying to fill unused demand on those off peak days by having lower fares. So the prices haven't been set yet. We'll work on that with the states, with the city and the Southern Rail Commission on what the 15 prices might look like. But then we would actively revenue manage so that we would move prices up and down to induce demand and fill all of the capacity.
So in this situation is a little different because in the other states, Mississippi, Louisiana, they all give. In this situation, Alabama is not giving, correct?
Yeah, there are 2 states and 1 city. Yep.
All right. So I guess from a state point, would they have any say so if they're not participating in this?
No, not unless they're a signature to the contract.
Okay. All right. Have we done from a benefit of Mobile? Have we done an estimated economic benefit that Mobile would bring?
I'm looking at Knox Ross from the Southern Rail Commission and being told yes.
Yeah, we've been working closely with University of South Alabama.
Yeah.
And I'm going to ask. I'm Knox Ross. I'm chairman of the Southern Rail Commission from Mississippi. Just for your benefit, and Ray alluded to this, the Southern Rail Commission is a 3-state compact with 6 commissioners from each state. We're all appointed by our respective governors, and we all are uncompensated for our time. But we are a compact that was formed to do work just like this, that multi-state operations of trains, and this was one. This is our most important one. Several years ago, we commissioned the University of Southern Mississippi, the Trent Lott Institute, to do an economic analysis. It's basically a Mississippi analysis. We then brought in the University of South Alabama to do an analysis of the impact on Mobile, economic impact, not only the construction, but also the ongoing operation of the train. And then recently, because this was done back on a previous CRISI that was much lower in investment than the current one, our policy advisors at Transportation for America went in and updated the study for us. And I know that David Clark has been working closely with them and would be happy to provide you with all that information. But yes, we have. It is very significant, because I don't have it in front of me, but it's a very significant economic impact to the state of Alabama and to Mobile. But I think that going back to an earlier question you had, since Mobile is the partner, and I think Amtrak talks about state partners because that's what they have. So I don't want you to misunderstand what they're telling you. Mobile would be the partner. And so Mobile would be controlling what goes on. I mean, you would be the person to do that. The state would not be involved in that at all. And then working with us at the Southern Rail Commission is sort of someone to help you figure all that out. But we'll provide you with whatever information, economic information you want to help make your decision. But I think you'll find it's very impactful on a scale of tens and hundreds of millions of dollars of impact to the city. Because on that line, Mobile is just like the Mississippi cities post-Katrina, is that y'all have committed millions of dollars of investment into your downtowns, which you can see. You've got the Battle House Hotel, Renaissance Hotel. You've got all the restaurants that are right here. The train's going to stop right behind us, and people are going to get off, and they'll be here. Either they'll come for the night to get on the cruise ship the next day. You've got enough stuff to do in Mobile to spend a weekend. You're about to build a new arena. You're going to build this convention center hotel right next door to the station. It's set up for it, for people to come here and enjoy what you all have said. I mean, it's terrific. I mean, you should be proud of it. And this is something that's sort of like, it's going to bring the people to you. In my estimation, it's going to be far more than you or I even expect, because it's going to make it easy for people to come here and enjoy what the city has invested in.
Well, I totally agree with you. Thank you so much.
Right.
You did an
Right.
amazing job.
Well, it's been
Yeah.
interesting. I mean, I've been doing this almost 15 years and coming to Mobile and seeing the transformation of all of these cities is just tremendous. And you guys have invested the money, and this is just a way to make that investment pay off. But David, we'll get you what you need.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you, Mr.
Thank
President.
you.
Mr. Carroll?
Thank you. You may mention that all the other states or I mean, I guess, quote, you said all services have to be funded by a state. In our case, we're funding this and we're a city.
Yep.
Where does that leave us?
Thank you, Knox, for correcting me there. And I probably should have stuck to my remarks because it says a state or a non-Amtrak entity. And so it can be a governmental entity, it can be a community, it can be a city. We have joint powers authorities. We have regional boards. It's very similar to the Southern Rail Commission. We have a commission in Maine, the Northern New England Regional Passenger Authority. So we have other entities besides states that contract with us to run service. And we had a longtime partnership with the communities between Chicago and Indianapolis that funded a train called the Hoosier State. So we have a precedent for this of having communities and cities provide operating support for trains.
You mentioned 3.088.
3.048.
048
Yeah.
contribution from the city of Mobile.
Mhm.
I'm taking that's over a period of time.
Yeah. Yep. There's a federal grant program called the Restoration and Enhancement Grant Program, which is, as an interesting piece of history, was created to help restore service on the Gulf Coast after Hurricane Katrina, and it is now used nationwide. But the R&E program is used to restore Amtrak services on these corridors around the country. It's operating support. And in the railroad industry, most of the capital dollars, or most of the dollars that the Federal Railroad Administration apportions, are capital dollars. This is the one operating grant program that the FRA has. What your contribution is essentially a 20% match of that R&E grant.
So that's somewhat like Metro ridership in a yearly contribution. Is it similar
I didn't follow
to the way the buses work?
Yeah, yes. Your local transit authorities would receive an FTA grant from the Federal Transit Administration for both operating and capital. That's really the model that the FRA is now following with their operating grant program.
So ridership has a major role to play in this.
Yeah, I think there's the R&E program right now, as of today, only has 2 recipients. There's only 2 entities that have ever applied for it and been successful: this corridor and the new corridor in Minnesota. So it hasn't had a robust, 10 entity competition in the past. But the operating metrics of service would ultimately, and if there were many applicants at the same time, the operating metrics would play a role in, I think, how the FRA would make decisions.
So what happens when ridership is very low?
So we haven't had to face that yet because we're going to set another ridership record this year, and our ridership continues to get better and better nationwide. The new service in Minnesota, which started last week, is going gangbusters. But as I said, we have the ability to work with the partners on pricing models to induce demand and address issues where we have extra capacity by raising and lowering fares. And it's proven to be really phenomenally successful.
So how are you modeling? I hear you talking about these other cities.
Mhm.
Those are cities where rail is paramount to their business transactions daily. In our part of the country, we're not that paramount. So how are you modeling your ridership approach here?
We use the same ridership model for all of our services around the country. And whether it's an existing train or a newly proposed service, we have one model that we use to do our annual operating plan. But I just want to highlight that we have a very diverse group of state partners and state services. The state of Vermont, one of the least populated states in the country, pays us to run 2 trains a day on 2 different routes. The Oklahoma and Texas share 1 daily round trip between Dallas, Fort Worth, and Oklahoma City. The state of Michigan pays us to run a train up to Grand Rapids, Michigan. So we have examples of states fund services to smaller regional cities with very limited frequencies. And then we have what you're talking about, where states pay us or contract with us to run multiple frequencies between huge cities. So it's a very diverse group of partners. And the model sort of takes into account the demographics of a route, the employment rate and the population rate.
You know, the key thing here is state. You keep saying state. We're a municipality. What happens when that $3 million runs out?
Well, let's say a few things on that. The R&E grant program has been modified so that it's going to go from a 3-year program to a 7-year program. So there's potential to continue to apply for operating support from the Restoration Enhancement Program through the FRA. I think it's the Southern Rail Commission's approach and belief that when the 3 years of funding expire, that they will continue to seek funding from all 3 partners.
So that responsibility will no longer be the city of Mobile's after 3 years.
I'm going to defer to the Southern Rail Commission on this. And the reason I want to do that is because the entity that we sign contracts with, no matter whether it be a municipality or a state, ultimately decide where their funding is going to come from.
So when we started this process, we started working with each state individually, Louisiana, Mississippi, and Alabama. And in Louisiana's case, we worked with the Louisiana TOTD, and they identified a source of match funds. We worked with Mississippi DOT, and they are funding it through congestion mitigation dollars from the federal government, which we worked to get that program changed so it can be used for that. So I think that's a very unique way they're doing it. And then in Alabama, we just had a different set of challenges that I think the main thing is in Louisiana, Mississippi, we had a federal champion, whether it was Senator Wicker in Mississippi, Senator Cassidy in Louisiana, and then you had Governor Edwards in Louisiana, and also Governor Bryant in Mississippi, who were very much engaged in this and want to get it done. And Alabama is a different set of facts, which I think have changed. We are currently working, Toby Bennington, who is my counterpart on the executive committee at Southern Rail Commission from Alabama, has regular conversations with the governor's staff. And I think we're trying to set up a meeting after the session is over in the next couple of months to talk to them about moving forward on what does this look like after year 3. Because it is very unusual for a city, and I got it, to do this, but it was the only way forward. It was the only option we had. You guys were the only people who would step up and do it, because it was just no other way forward if we didn't do it this way. And we always intended and commit to working. I mean, we'll all have to work together to do this, to working with the state to see if there are other ways to do this. Because it's easier to sell something when it's running and when you actually can say, oh yeah, it's working. Or to your point, maybe it doesn't. Well, then it just doesn't. I mean, things end. I mean, Amtrak has had services that in Indiana, for example, that don't run anymore.
So you're telling me after 3 years, if the state doesn't fund it, then the city needs to find another way to continue to fund it.
That's right. Well, somebody does.
So we're still on the hook after 3
No,
years.
you're not. I mean, you're not. You just say, I'm not going to do it.
All right. So we have the option to opt out
Right,
after 3 years.
right.
So what happens if we don't?
What do you mean? What happens?
What happens if we don't re-up after 3
The
years?
train probably stops.
It stops. Does that
Right.
mean it doesn't stop here? Does it mean
It means it doesn't run anywhere, because I don't think the Mississippi and Louisiana have any interest in paying for the train to run to Mobile.
Okay, so it stops over there.
That's right. And that's really the commitment we have from all 3 states. I mean, we don't have anything in writing from them over 3 years. Just what they've committed to is absolutely nothing different than what you have.
Let's talk about the lease agreement for a minute.
Right.
Where you're leasing from us, I take it?
Yeah.
What are
Yes.
you leasing from us?
Land for the station track, station platform, and the lead track.
So you're leasing the dirt. Who's responsible for building the the actual
We're
station?
constructing the interim facility.
You
Amtrak
are?
is with the Christie grant. Yeah.
So all that's your responsibility?
Mhm.
What about the track?
CSX is doing the track work.
Okay. All right, that's
Yep.
great. And all track improvements are the responsibility of?
CSX.
Okay, and who owns the tracks beyond the maintenance and all of that is?
It's all CSX.
all
Norfolk Southern
CSX.
has some track by New Orleans.
By New Orleans?
Mhm.
So that's good to know. What about the infrastructure needed to make all of this work in conjunction with everything that the port has had out there and the meetings that we were in with David Clark and all of those other meetings that I've attended, I guess over the last year, a year and a half? What about all of those things?
Sure. So we have an agreement with all parties that led to the $178 million Christie grant to fund the improvement that all parties believed was necessary to accommodate the passenger train on the infrastructure while still accommodating CSX and the port's needs.
You know, the biggest thing I'm concerned about is the liability after 3 years.
Sure.
You know, and then also, well, if we're not building the platform and you are, makes me feel better. If we're not doing the improvements to the rail and you're providing infrastructure, it makes me feel better. But what bugs me is we have to find over the next 4 years, and that 4-year period in my head sticks because of other obligations that we're facing. That we'll have a tough 4 years coming up. Is if we have to re-up, then where does that come from in our budget? You know, and that kind of sticks right now.
Fully understand. I completely do. As I said, we now have 21 entities that contract with us for service, and I understand what they go through in their budget hearings every year. And what we find is that most of our partners are very aggressive in pushing costs out of the services and also growing revenue to lower the operating ratio that is ultimately required for them. I'm not going to speak for the Southern Rail Commission because I think Mr. Ross has laid out sort of their strategy pretty clearly. But I will say that maybe I'm getting ahead of myself here, but we have other state services which are not funded by all the states through which they run.
Mr. Lang, I appreciate all the statements. I'm going to
Sure.
wait a while and let somebody else ask a bunch of questions.
Mr. Days?
Thank you all for being here today. Appreciate your making the time for us.
Get a little bit closer to your mic.
I said I want to thank everybody for being here today and coming down to give us some information on this very important project. I'd like to start really at the very beginning. And if you could, Mr. Lang, take us first through the first 3 years of the operation. My recollection when we first discussed this 4 years ago was that the city's $3 million was kind of phased in over time, where it was maybe lower at the beginning and got larger
Other way
in the later
around.
years.
But yeah.
Take me through
Yeah,
that.
the R&E grant program, which has now been modified from a 3-year program to a 7-year program, but the R&E grant program starts at 90% federal support, so 10% partner support, goes 80 in the second year, then 20, 70, 30, 60, 40. There's one jump from it's in the 7th year. I think it jumps down to 30%, but it's a 7-year phase out. That's generally about 10% lower federal contribution a year. And you got the award when it was a 3-year program. It's been modified to a 7-year program, and I think that the partners envision applying for more federal support to keep this service running beyond 3. But you are only on the hook for 3 years, and that's it.
Okay, so the
And
first
right now, Louisiana and Mississippi are only on the hook for 3 years. What we're talking about here is a 3-year program. I think the spirit of your question, though, is beyond 3 years. What
well,
is
no,
it?
I want to get to the first 3 years to begin with. So
Mhm.
what's the subsidy in year one?
The
The federal subsidy.
The federal subsidy would be 90%,
And the federal subsidy in year 2 would be
80%,
80%. The federal subsidy in year 3 would be 70%,
yeah.
right? So can we translate that into dollars?
Oh, I know you're going to ask me that, and I don't have that off the top of my head, but I can get you the answer for that in terms of what each partner would put up in the first year. I have a trusty assistant who has those figures.
Ben Dotson, Amtrak project manager. So the city of Mobile's contributions, each of the three local parties' contribution year one would be around $500,000, and then $1 million in year two, and then $1.5 million in year three. So it totals to $3.048 million across the 3 years.
So about $500,000 the first year, $1 million the next year, and $1.5 million the next year.
Yep.
And so we can, if we kind of run that out, it looks like it's going up $500,000 every year. So let's look at the out years now.
Mhm.
So assuming there was no other source of revenue, we would go from 1.5 million in year 3 to 2 million in year 4, 2.5 million in year 5, and so forth. Is that right?
One thing I want to caution you about, though, the spirit of this program, the R&E program, was to help services get up and running. All services grow ridership and revenue over time. And so what you're getting here, the way that this program is structured, is the early years when you're building your ridership and revenue base, you're getting more funding. The expected outcome here is that the operating subsidy required for the services actually goes down over time as you increase ridership and revenue. So it's not a completely straight diagonal line up in terms of subsidy. You're growing your ridership and revenue, and so that line should flatten out.
What if the ridership and revenue doesn't grow?
Well, I mean, that's why Knox said it's your decision if a state wants to, or a municipality wants to continue it. I would just say that really all of our services are seeing tremendous increases in both ridership and revenue right now as the population responds to this mode of transportation.
Well, one of my concerns is that it's always more difficult to stop something that has started than it is to stop something that hasn't started. And the city of Mobile has been under tremendous pressure by the other states, by Amtrak, by a number of different, Southern Rail Commission, a number of different entities for us to participate in this program. And if we participate, whether the program does well or ill, we are going to be even under more pressure in years 4, 5, and 6 down the road to continue to participate no matter how much it costs. So I'm very much concerned about that. Let me ask you this question. What do you expect? Let's just take the first 3 years again. What do you expect the annual operating revenue, and let's say passenger generated revenue, to be from this line in years 1, 2, and 3?
You have that. So, well, let's do the math in my head. Let me get back to you on the expected passenger revenue, but the operating subsidy from the city and the feds would total $5 million. So the passenger revenue would be somewhere between 800,000 and $1 million.
Let's take it the other way around. What do you expect the annual operating expense to be in each year?
Well, that's what we just gave you, which is 500,000 from each party, so $1.5 million, and then probably $5 million from the feds, 10% from the partners, $7 million. I just did that off the top of my head, but yeah.
So let's take it. So in year 1, let's just take it year 1.
Mm-hmm.
The operating expense is how much?
From each partner?
No. The total operating expense.
Well, I'll do the math in my head. 3 partners providing $500,000 each is $1.5 million. 90% of that's coming from the feds, or 90%. The feds are matching up to 90% on that. So feds are matching $9 million. Yeah, so $10.5 million.
So you got $10.5 million in operating expense the first year. The 2 states and the city provide $1.5 million in year 1,
Mhm.
right?
Yeah.
So now you're down to 9 million. And does the federal government provide all of that 9 million?
Yeah.
Well, no, because you're going to have the passenger revenue. Which
Well, yeah, there's the passenger revenue. Yeah. So the passenger revenue is going up, but yeah.
So you got $10.5 million in expense. States and the city are providing $1.5 million. And then you got how much passenger revenue in year one?
I think I wish I had the stats.
I think it's about 1.2 million.
Yeah. In year one.
But I would point out in our ridership and revenue models, we assume a ramp up as people learn about the service and get familiar with it. So we're only projecting about 66% of normal ridership in the first year, and then it grows and fully matures over the 3 years. So by the end of year 3, it's 100% of what we're projecting is actually full.
I'm sorry, by the end of year 3, you're expecting the passenger generated revenue to
What do you say?
pay the operating costs?
No. Just to be fully realized in what we're projecting as people are familiar with the service. So it would be mature by year 3.
Well, what would the passenger generated revenue be when it's mature?
I believe it's somewhere around 2.5 to 3 million.
So it'd be 3 million. And assuming that the operating expense didn't grow, you're still at $7.5 million deficit operating before you get to any subsidies by the state or federal governments, correct? That's when the system's mature, right? So if we didn't get any help from anybody else, at that point, what's that? That's the 2 states and the city would 2.5 million apiece per year when the system's mature, if we don't get any help from anybody else.
There's also a couple other potential drivers of revenue. There's food and beverage sales on the train. You can also do station and external onboard advertising that also other state partners do for additional revenue. Additionally, once the $178 million Chrissy improvements are completed, the travel time will go down about 20 minutes. And so that will also increase ridership with more people choosing to take the train if it's faster.
So even when it's mature, the passenger revenue is only covering 30% of the operating cost. No, is that right? Less, yeah, less. Less than 30% of the operating cost.
So I want to point out a couple of things that my colleague Ben said here. And one is that when the improvements are completed, the runtime on the trip goes down by 20 minutes, making it a more attractive service. We haven't modeled that yet. And in fact, the models that we ran have to be modeled to comply with the R&E grant program. We have to build the models based on the inputs that they require to be put in. So we haven't modeled the future growth opportunities as a result of faster trip time.
How many passengers are you? And I know it's different for each because someone might get on in Bay St. Louis and go to New Orleans and come back. So how do you measure how many passengers you're going to have on this line?
Our model uses 2 main inputs, which is the population and the employment rate. That's the model that we use.
One of you, I think it was you, Mr. Lang, said that each day, it may not have been you, someone said that each day this train will bring hundreds of visitors to Mobile every day.
Yeah, it's about 300 a day. Yeah.
So your estimate is 300 a day.
Yeah. That's to start.
Per day. Yeah, 3 per day at the beginning.
Business day?
No.
Yeah. That's a big number.
No.
Yeah.
300 per day at the beginning.
That's, I don't know if it's the beginning, but we'll have 300 seats available for sale to and from Mobile every day.
300 seats is not 300 people.
We have a really high load factor. We really do. So, that's The 300 seats per day is 100% capacity. Yeah, we won't do that every day. That's dropping off. That's not picking up.
So this is, can I?
No, let me go on through. Just, so you're expecting 300 entrainments and detrainments in Mobile every day?
No, I think we'll have 300 seats leaving a day and 300 seats arriving a day. We have really high load factor though, and we'll have peak trains and off-peak trains, and we can hit that number.
Can you define load factor?
Yeah, load factor is the percentage of seats sold.
Are there any on these lines? Are there any? And this question may have been asked earlier. I think Mr. Carroll may have asked it. But are there any other cities subsidizing rail traffic that you're aware of?
We had, as I said, we had the communities between Indianapolis and Chicago that provided operating support for the train called the Hoosier State. Yeah,
But that's not
the
running anymore.
state took it over, but yeah, that train.
That's
yeah,
not running anymore.
Yeah.
So right now the answer would be no.
right. Generally, the communities that we serve fund the station operations.
When you were talking about, this is kind of different, this is a different subject from the economics, but you mentioned earlier, let me put it this way. You've been talking about these short line runs like the one we're talking about here. And you said, let's see, all short distance trains have to be funded by non-Amtrak entity. Let's say y'all decided to restore service from Jacksonville to Los Angeles, which would not be a short line, which would be a through line. Would you have to come back to us for anything at that point? Or could you just flip the switch
no.
and say, we're going to restore it?
We wouldn't come back to you for a long distance train, no.
Okay. Okay, I'm going to pause for a little while. Let's ask questions.
Thank you. So just to kind of stay on that train of thought that Mr. Dave's, I guess the program now, we obtained the 3-year program, I guess, the 500 million, then 1.5 million over the 3 years. You alluded to a 7-year program. I guess that's now converted to. We would not be eligible for that, I guess, assuming because.
Oh, sure, you'd be eligible. Absolutely.
Okay.
Yep.
Is that how, like the 7 million deficit that past year 3? I guess that would factor into after year 3 here. Due to the fact this is a 3-year program, we're just kind of at the end of year 3, we're just kind of stuck at the moment with, trying to figure out who's going to pay the deficit moving forward, I guess. Is that just with this 3-year program kind of where we are as far?
I think I understood your question, but when the R&E program was created, it was a 3-year program. In the PREA legislation, they modified it to make it a 7-year program. What they did to your grant, and the FRAs in the room, they can fact check me, but what they did to your grant is they made the rules of the 7-year program apply to your 3 years. So you got the 90, 80, 70. Okay. The original 3-year program, I think, was 80, 60, 40. And you got the benefit of the new rules in the 3-year program.
Gotcha. And let me just talk about ridership. So kind of what does it look like right now? A train leaving Mobile in the morning, train coming back in the evening. Is that what it kind of looks like with us?
No, well, 2 trains a day, but I'll pull up the schedule.
So 2 departing, 2 arriving a day, I guess.
Yeah, so there's a train that will leave in the morning at 6:30, head over to New Orleans, and then another train will leave at, I believe, 4:30 in the afternoon towards New Orleans, and then another pair of trains coming back the other direction arriving.
Gotcha. So let's say that we, coming out of year 3, I understand ramp up, I understand, projected occupancy, load capacity. I understand that, but let's say that we don't hit the ridership that we need. Let's say that everybody, year one, everything's great. We're riding trains. Look at this. We're on a train. Now, year two, year three, what if ridership, diminishes? I mean, is there a potential for Amtrak to say we're no longer going to run 2 a day? We're going to run 1 a day, or what is that?
That's a decision made by the partners. So, yeah, our partners determine their service profile, how many frequencies they want. So that we don't step in and tell them what to do.
Would you foresee, let's just say that ridership doesn't meet the full capacity, year two, year three, running more of a deficit because it's not, we're just not achieving the numbers we need. Would you see y'all coming back asking for more? Or?
It's a fixed price agreement, so there's no risk for us coming back asking for more.
Okay. All righty. That's it for me.
Vice President.
I think most of the questions have been answered. There are only a few of us that are on the council now who were here when you all originally came to us. And we remember back then some of the discussion, in particular, why Mobile is the only city involved in this, why Mobile is the only city being asked or basically being on the hook to make this happen when we have other states. And as you mentioned, or somebody mentioned earlier, there were federal champions in Mississippi and Louisiana, as well as state champions in Mississippi and Louisiana, but there were none in Alabama. So the only way to make it happen was to go to a city in order to make this happen. And I think that still kind of sticks in a lot of our craw that, we are a city, but yet we are having to ante up just like 2 other states are. I understand, I know where you're going, I've been to the meetings and I get it. But I think that still just really bothers a lot of people, that we're having to do this or being asked to do this. I think also for a lot of us, the 3-year thing, if we felt really confident that 3 million and some change was all we would have to pay, phased in, that might be something, that most everybody could go forward with. But we're not confident that that will happen because obviously in year 4, 5, 6 on down the road, you still need operating funds to continue, doing what you need to do.
Let me address this.
Well, let her finish.
So yeah.
But come on up, Knox.
So I'm just saying that's why, you're sensing some pushback with doing this. If we actually saw hundreds of visitors coming into Mobile every day, rather than maybe seeing 10s and 20s or 30s going out of Mobile every day, or even hundreds going out of Mobile every day to New Orleans or to Biloxi, that also would be something important. I'm not convinced that we'll see hundreds of people coming in every day. It would be great if we did. So I think those are just some of the issues and the concerns that we have as we continue, talking about this.
I'm going to
I know that wasn't a question.
No, that's
It was
okay.
really just kind of a statement.
I'll say this because as the vice president of the state supported service line at Amtrak, my signature's on the contract with all of our partners around the country for their services. And we have 29 trains now funded by these 21 partners. Regional entities come to us and have us run trains to help them meet their transportation demand. And once the train is up and running, they get a lot of say over the service delivery and the appearance of the service. And it's a model that works. And we have my service line, I have a P&L of about $900 million a year. About 250 million of that is funding from the partners. The rest is passenger revenue. Our services all over the country are seeing significant increases in ridership. We're back at pre-COVID levels, and we'll set a ridership record this year. And it's my service line that's really leading the charge. These corridors that states come to us and ask us to run trains for them on all over the country are important corridors, short distance corridors they all parallel highways, but they have a big population base and a big passenger base. to fill those trains. I know I have trains today that will have standees on them because we just don't have the capacity that we need to meet the demand that's out there. We are very aggressive with our revenue modeling. I talked about it before, the 9 RBDs or the 15 RBDs that we use, the revenue bucket distributions. We move demand around from one train to another on a particular route because we know that as capacity gets short on a train, we just raise the prices. We'll fill it, but other people will choose to take the lower fare train because it's all they can afford. And that helps all the parties grow their ridership and revenue. And that's what we're doing proactively with our partners around the country. Knox.
I don't disagree with you about this, but this was the only way we could do it. I mean, I don't disagree. I mean, it's especially the new people that are here. I think the best way to put this, there are two things, is that my counterpart, Toby Bennington from Anniston, has been doing yeoman's work on your behalf to educate the governor's staff, and they have been very interested in this, and because we had no communication with them for a long time. And he is planning, and myself and my counterpart from Louisiana are planning on in person coming to Alabama to meet with the governor's staff to talk about this, because we believe that it's the role of the state to pay for it. I mean, I don't disagree with any of you, but where we are today to do the service, Mobile stands in the gap. I mean, that I don't know any other way to put it. But we've committed to every partner that we will continue to work to find other ways to fund this. I mean, things like casino revenue sponsorship in Mississippi, things in the city of New Orleans, events, but you have Senior Bowl, you've got the different bowls here, you got all the different things. There's so many opportunities for that. So you can't really look at this as a ticket revenue train, because it's a unique service that covers a lot of things. But the other thing is our relationships with all of our partners in Alabama are much better. With the port, CSX, Norfolk Southern, and in Louisiana, we have a good working relationship with them now, which is very welcomed. And there's a tremendous amount of physical infrastructure improvements going to happen between here and the Mississippi state line that, quite frankly, Alabama's going to get for free. I mean, other than what the port's putting in, not to belittle that, but the state or the city or anybody else is not putting anything into that. And it's going to, how much is that? $72 million in infrastructure. Yes, in Alabama.
That's the grant.
They did. They're matching the grant. The port and CSX are matching the grant. They see this, and they see this as basically turning the railroad from Mobile to New Orleans into a 21st century railroad. I mean, today they can only run that railroad one way. This will allow them to put in the infrastructure to run it both ways. It will support, I think we were talking this morning that the port in Mobile is growing faster in container traffic than any other port in the country. This will allow them to be able to put container traffic on that, which I don't think they run any to New Orleans right now. Don't quote me on that, but this allows them the capacity to do so. Because they very much support this and have been very helpful to us, I guess, over the last year or so to do that. But back to your point, that's what we'll do. I mean, we will work with you. I mean, I live in Mississippi, obviously, but we will work with the city of Mobile to work with the state to find the ways to do that, to make sure that they know that this is important. And I think that we've worked really hard with our partners at Amtrak, and it's been a tough process to get this so that it minimizes your risk, because we got it. I mean, we understand that we really shouldn't have to be asking the city of Mobile to do this, but it's the only path we have currently. But know that we're working hard with the state to do that. We have good discussions with them, and I look forward to both of us going together to work that forward. I mean, we've had these same discussions in Mississippi and Louisiana. What do we do after year 3? Well, basically the feedback is, so the state of Mississippi is putting $14 million into this as a match for the infrastructure. That's not the R&D infrastructure. The state of Louisiana is putting, I think, $6 million. I mean, they see it's important, and they see it also as beneficial to the freight infrastructure of their of the two states. But I think that we stand ready to work with you all to move forward and find that out-year funding, because we think it'll be successful. I mean, what you were talking about reminds me of the mayor of Gulfport. When we first started this, Billy Hughes is a friend of mine, so I'm not talking about him. He was not really for this because he said all this is going to do is take people out of Gulfport. All it's going to do is take people out of Gulfport. He looked at it and saw the things they've done in Gulfport and said, no, this really isn't. This is going to make our city livable, more livable than it is. And I'll tell you, like I tell everybody else, you guys sell yourself short on the city. It's a place people would want to visit. They want to come here. You can't think, so I'm putting my old mayor hat on. You can't think that everybody's going to leave. They're not. What this does is makes all these cities from Bay St. Louis to Mobile more livable, because then you can live here, you can go over there. Taxes a little better in Alabama, Mississippi, maybe you can live there, you can work here. It makes it much more livable than it is now, which I'm not saying it's not, but you got a tremendous asset here and something to sell. And I think that this part of it just makes it work. But I think Amtrak's come a long way in putting together, we're going to take the same money you committed to. Everybody knows about inflation. You're going to take the same amount of money for the same number of years and make it work, and they're going to take the risk for you, because they also recognize that you're not a state and you can't go get money. And so it's a risk-free deal for 3 years. I think your risk is exactly what you pointed out. I mean, if people keep demanding it, I think that's the voters to decide on that. But we will do everything we can to help you make that work, and we're doing that now.
Hold up.
Okay.
Going to be Mr. Days, then Mr. Carroll, then Mr. Reynolds. The questions that I have for him have been pretty much answered, but I would like to, after Mr. Reynolds, I would like to hear from the Chamber of Commerce and also Visit Mobile, the pros and the cons of which I heard this afternoon. Mr. Days.
I can, Mr. Ross, I appreciate you being here today. And I can understand why this line is important to Mississippi. I can understand why it's important to Louisiana. I can understand why it's important to Amtrak. I can understand why it's important to the Port of Mobile. But all of those entities have billions of dollars of annual revenue. And you all asking the poor little old city of Mobile to come up with the money and saying that Mobile is the linchpin of this entire effort. And if Mobile doesn't come up with its money, the whole thing's going to fall apart and everybody's going to go to hell. I just don't believe it. There are billions and billions of dollars of revenue out there, and if other people want it, let them pay for it.
Yeah, Mr. Carroll, then you, Mr. Reynolds.
All right. First of all, I'm not trying to shoot you down. All right. I'm really not trying to shoot you down. But 10 years ago, we went through a presentation just like this, where somebody told us we would roughly have about 1 million people a year to visit a museum that we put on the other side of the water over there. And the projections of that, and right now at 300 people a day coming to a dead end stop in Mobile, that's roughly 900,000 people a year coming into the city of Mobile. Don't think that's real. I mean, the Battleship is our largest tourist attraction, and it doesn't see 1 million people a year. So I cannot see 300,000 people a year coming to the city of Mobile. Now, enough people coming to the city of Mobile, that's fine. That's granted. I'm all for that. But based on the numbers that I'm seeing, I don't feel like it's a good business deal for the city to swallow. But what I heard you say also is that $72 million in capital improvements to the rails that's being done by
within the state of Alabama.
So is that just how much of that is right here in Mobile?
Jim, this is the gentleman who did the agreement.
I'm Jim Blair, also from Amtrak. So there's $12 million of smaller projects and $50 million being invested between Brooklyn and downtown here. on CSX tracks. The port project, which is right on Virginia Street, is a $4 million project. So those are projects that are right in Mobile.
So we're talking about $50 million over 3 years, which outweighs our $3 million of expenditures in capital gain projects. The next thing to ask is that has there been a study to see what the port gains from that $50 million of infrastructure improvement? How does it benefit them? Are they getting additional rail time? Are they going faster? Does it help them get the cargo containers in and out of the port? Does it speed up their process? What does it do for their logistics? Do we know that number? Because evidently with that much infrastructure improvement, then our port is gaining. Do we know those numbers?
Well, I don't want to speak for Mr. Driscoll's port activity, but the Virginia Street lead project was a port-selected project to allow them additional opportunity to grow traffic into and out of the intermodal container facility. So that connects, that allows them to double up their train activity on the line, which is currently constrained to a single track. This allows them to bring more trains into the intermodal container facility just south of town here.
So in essence, it increases our capacity to get things in and out of the port, which then increases our financial abilities here in the city. So it's a gain for us at the port, but it's a lose for us actually with our contributions downtown.
I don't know that I'd count it as a loss, but part of an investment.
After 3 years, I'd be a little nervous to know where that additional $2.5 million is going to come at the end of the third year. But it sounds like if our port is making additional money, then our city is making additional money, because right now our largest economic generator in the city is the Port of Alabama, and also probably right now in the region our port is really driving things. So I would tell the council that would be a benefit if the port's making money on top of the capital contribution. I worry about our financial contribution, but the value to the city and to the region is the port itself. So that's where I think that's where our direction should be looking. We also have to remember that in less than a year's time, we're going to have a new governor. So you got to think about the politics behind it too. What is the next governor going to say or do as far as the contributions would be in order for Amtrak or for the continuation of that, with the state playing a role in the contributions to the rail system itself? Now, I don't know who the next governor is going to be, but it would be wise if you guys would be entertaining the idea of that. Again, I'm not trying to tell you guys what to do or how to go about what you're doing. But if we're going to realize an increased capacity at the port, and that number is going to be in the millions per year based on how much we can get in and out of the port, then I'd say that our port would erase the cost of our contributions to it if we're growing our port at the same time. That's what I would think right now. But on the business end for us, it's a soft business end for us right now if it was just us in this game and there was no benefit from what we're doing. So if you guys could ask the port what's our capitalized increase based on what they get in and out of here, I'd like to know that number, because I'm pretty sure it's bigger than what we're seeing right now if they have additional rail to get additional materials in and out of the port itself.
I just want to make sure I understood the facts when the gentleman from Southern Rail Commission was speaking. Sorry. Did I understand you to say that the port or the state of Alabama is investing $72 million in rail improvements?
No. The feds. It's actually 170 plus million, but within the state of Alabama, 70 million.
That would be the freight rail partners and the federal government. So there's other than what the state docks is matching, all of that money is either private investment or federal dollars.
All right. So
there's no
the
state of Alabama is putting no money into that other than the state docks.
The Port of Mobile is putting in $72 million.
No.
How much is the Port of Mobile putting in?
I don't have what is it? Is it 3.5 million? Yeah.
All right. And you said Mississippi is making a capital investment, I guess, for the state.
14 million.
And Louisiana is making
6 million. $6 million. on top of their 3.049 million operating support.
All right.
That's right.
To go back to the port, just to make sure I understand. Port's putting in 3.5 million. I said the port, the Alabama Port Authority is putting in $3.5 million as part of the $72 million, whatever it is, right?
That was their match. Yeah.
So they're putting in basically what we're being asked to put in the first 3 years. Yeah.
And the port realizes a capital improvement of $72 million. Is that correct?
Yes.
I just, it doesn't add up to me, I guess, that, why the state of Alabama or the port isn't, helping with operating costs. Why is the city of Mobile? I struggle with that. We would realize a gain on, potentially some tourism dollars, it seems, but the real gain appears to be the Port of Mobile or the state of Alabama realizing a better flow of goods and services throughout the state.
You're absolutely correct. I do.
How we are at the position of the states not participating.
Because-
And then I want to know your timeline of when you need a decision on this. And is there still an opportunity for things to be patched up here with the state?
Well, I guess there would, but I mean, we've got to do something. I mean, we've been working on this for 14 years. I guess we can keep going, but the feds are not going to wait, and Amtrak's going to move on to something else. I mean, I don't disagree with any of you. None of this makes any good sense, but a lot of things don't make sense. You guys were the only people who would step up and do this. The state wouldn't do it. We talked to Congressman Carl, who used to be on the county commission. They wouldn't do it. You guys saw benefit in it and said, let's do it, because nobody else would. Now, we believe that because we had the partners that we have now, the same people weren't in charge of CSX or the port. And they were not for this. And that poisoned the water, quite frankly, with the state, because the state is going to do, I think, I'm not disagreeing with this. They're going to do what the port asked them to do, which they weren't interested in talking to us. But after a lot of work, a lot of hard work by a lot of people bringing, as I think you've figured out, a lot of money to the table, everybody says, yeah, I think this is a good idea. It helps support, it helps CSX, it helps Norfolk Southern. It makes the economy better for all of us, especially in Mobile. I mean, Mobile's getting Alabama's getting $72 million for basically no investment. I don't disagree with any of that, but that's just where we are based on the set of facts that were presented. I mean, there was no other way we could do it. And I don't know, I mean, unless one of y'all can call somebody and say, we need y'all to do this, and they'll do it. I don't know any other way to do it, is to say, we get this thing 3 years down the road. You and us work together, because nobody's going to take my meeting, but they'll take your meeting in Montgomery to say, and we'll go with you. Amtrak will come. Everybody will be there and say, this is what it's doing. This is where it is. This is what we need to do. And we've committed to that. But I get it. I'm as frustrated as any of you are, but I want to see this done because I think it'll work. I think it's important. But you guys were the only one that would step in the gap. We just couldn't get anybody else to do it.
Mr. Penn, I know we'll ask for a visit Mobile, but I want to hit the council members that have not been yet.
Yep.
Mr. Penn.
Yep. Thank you, Mr.
Yes, sir.
President. My question is, if we don't approve this, will we be able to get the $72 million improvement, all this? So for me, we don't even need to be worried about what the state is not doing at this point. The benefit is so major. And when you look at the opportunities, one, we keep saying that we want the city of Mobile to grow. Well, this is the opportunity to get people coming in. The second thing we bring is $72 million of improvement in the state of Alabama, $50 million more in the Mobile area region. Is that correct? Yeah. So you got $50 million. It's a win. It's a win. And this give us an opportunity now to answer my colleague question is, You can't tell the state leaders what to do, but we can put pressure. You take these 3 years and we show that we can show proof. And now we say, listen, the port is benefiting. This was the issue. We can't do nothing unless the port says it. Well, now the port is benefiting unless y'all get the money the next 3 years. And that's what we need to write letters. We need to talk about this. And we can't be afraid to speak up. And so I support this initiative. I don't even know why we still talking about it. It makes sense. It's a win. It's a win. $72 million, $3 million.
Yeah, just to pick up on what you said, the Chrissy grant does not get, it's been awarded, but the grant dollars don't get expended until the agreement for the operation of the train is started. So if it doesn't happen, there's no grant.
I got to answer the timeline.
Go ahead.
When's the expiration date on this Chrissy grant? When's the expiration date?
Chrissy grants, I guess I should ask the FRA on that, but some Chrissy grants can be extended over and over again.
What's Amtrak drop dead time?
I want to, all due respect to my friend Knox Ross, we're not walking away. So we're in for the long haul to get you through this.
I would like to hear from Visit Mobile. I think the chamber had to step out, but at least hear some pros and cons from Visit Mobile, and then. Yeah.
What's that, Joel? Hey, look, this is 6 years of being on the Southern Rail Commission. I think there's a happy ending here. First of all, some numbers I had over last Friday from John Robert Smith, and
Before you start, I think what I was getting at this 100 people a day. I mean, how true? 100, 300 people a day. I mean, yeah. What's the truthfulness behind that?
I do want to say something on the construction impact of the $69 million for the rest of the track of Alabama. Smart Growth America takes a number of 483 jobs at $22.8 million, about 45,000 jobs, or $45,000 per annual wage on that. That's a pretty big deal in itself, besides the $69 million gift. But, you know, my teams and I have been responsible for numbers, accountable all my life in tourism of 35 years on both sides. And when I put a pencil to just hotel rooms impact alone on an annual basis, I was really conservative. I put about 10,000 hotel room nights that would be received downtown alone at an average rate of 170. Year to date, we're running about $175 ADR downtown. That's $1.7 million a year in just lodging revenue alone. You know, that's a pretty good deal, but then you have to take the retail and all of that on top of that. The original USM study at 1% was 18,000 passengers about 3 years ago. It said a 1 or 20% impact. I went on record as saying I agree with 1%. Now I agree with 2%. I agree that there's going to be 30 to 36,000 people, or at least a minimum of 100 people coming in a day, and about 30% of those staying overnight. At least. That's conservative.
Any question for Mr. Clark? Anyone?
David, did you say 10,000 room nights?
Yes, sir. 10,000. 30 people a day staying about, you know, that's 365 days. I just took it at 310 days, right? I took a 40% demand level of arriving at 11 o'clock and a 20% demand level arriving at 9 o'clock and kind of used a little matrix to configure the demand. And that's very conservative. I call it like a little mini cruise ship impact. And I think all the ingredients make a really big difference there.
And where are these people coming from, David?
They're coming from New Orleans to here, and Biloxi, and Gulfport, right? Bay St. Louis. I think everyone will want to come stay here.
Hold on. Carol, then Reynolds.
I was doing math in my head, David. I'm sorry. 10,000 people there.
10,000 room nights.
10,000.
Correct.
10,000
Over a year.
27 people a day, over 365
Correct.
coming into downtown Mobile.
Correct. Minimum.
Well, that's average. That's an average.
That's
It's an average.
average based on what formula?
Just demand generators and occupancy. You've got 3 cars, 210 times potentially 2, 420.
I'm a destination traveler. I want, when I get there, I'm not just riding to be riding, right? So they're going to come over here, go to Gulf Quest, walk around downtown, see our entertainment district, grab a hotel, and then turn around and go back to New Orleans or go back to wherever they're on that end, right? So it's a day trip is what we're saying. Basically 10,000 people a year do a day trip for room nights. That's what we're suggesting.
I'd say of those 36,000 people at a 2%, 10,000 of the 36 are staying overnight. Let me tell you a quick story to give you a bigger vision in terms of destination marketing, and I'll end with this one. Last Mardi Gras, we were collaborating with the State Department of Tourism for the United Kingdom. We had 35 riders from the United Kingdom wanting to fly into New Orleans to take the train over to watch our Mardi Gras. They were coming. They were hopeful that the train would be going out of the tracks. We had that arranged, and of course it didn't happen, but all kinds of opportunities with experiential traveling happen because of Amtrak, and there could be it's experiential. Destination travel is where it is today. We've got the Civic Center. You're spending $300 million over there. You have all kinds of entertainment venues. I think we're selling ourselves short in a lot of ways. I think this is a really good deal for 3 years.
It's not the 3 years I'm worried about, it's what happens after 3.
I mean, are there guarantees, right? Are there any guarantees?
Same thing they told me about Gulf Quest.
Different times.
You still
when I worked in DC, Amtrak was a necessity. You can't live without it, especially going from Union Station to Baltimore. That vision is in my head about ridership and repetitive ridership. Our city's 210,000, Gulfport's 90-something thousand, Pascagoula is 56,000, New Orleans is 500 some odd thousand. I mean, you can't add up at that many people between the 4 cities to get here to do the 2% math. When you try to do the 2% math ratio, you're talking about that number doesn't work. So, I want to support this. As a matter of fact, I would support it. I just think that in my mind, it feels like a bad business deal. It may be good for the city, and the returns that we're getting from the rail, will be good for the port. But it just feels like, financially it's a strain. And I'm looking at the $298 million over how many years we got to do it in the first 4 years that we're looking at, and adding an additional burden to that. And then I'm looking at the other burdens that we may have to pick up also as we go along. I mean, I don't mind doing this, but what does Mobile get out of it? The port's getting a lot out of it. Port's getting a bunch. So if the port's getting a bunch, I say Mobile's getting a bunch. But how do we in our citizens get a big benefit? Where's that number? You guys have to have a number that shows, or I'm sure you have a number that shows where our citizens get a big benefit from this, right? Do we?
Well, our citizens get to ride west, right? That's a benefit. Really, if I'm going to go to New Orleans, I'd bypass the $50 parking fee with my car, and I would ride Amtrak every time.
Well, you proved my point for me, David. Mobile doesn't have the Saints. And on any given Sunday, the Saints playing at home, every season ticket owner has a way to get out of Mobile and go over there and spend, $400 to $400 on a weekend, plus stay in a hotel, and then come back to Mobile and not spend a dime. But you're making my point. So what I want that same thing to come to my end. I want that coming to Mobile.
And $300 million right there below us, they're going to come.
All right, Councilman Reynolds.
I just had a question about the map on 10,000 visitors. And a room night, what is the average, the run rate on a room night, $300?
No, 175. No, it's 170.
175 ADR downtown hotels through April,
And then the hotel tax rate?
8%.
12 total.
That's 1.75 million in total lodging revenue. 8%, what is that? 600,000 in lodging tax?
Yeah.
No, city's 8%. County gets 2%. Yes, sir.
That 1% that goes to the.
All right, thank you.
Teddy, thanks.
All right, that's all you have, Councilman Reynolds. Oh.
Mr. Chairman,
Madam Vice President.
you know, we've been talking about the fact that you've got a different and better relationship with the state now because things have changed a little bit. And we here at the table have been talking about how we would really like for the state to be involved. Would it be possible for everyone, the city and Amtrak and the Rail Commission to make another run at the state to see if they would potentially go in with us halfway? To see if we can go ahead and get that started now rather than 3 years down the road, something like that?
Well, we're open to any and all sort of ideas for the structure of the funding relationship. We don't really determine what the structure is, the partners do, but we certainly provide our support, expertise, and help. We want to do it in partnership with the Southern Rail Commission because that's ultimately the entity we anticipate contracting with over the long term. But I mean, I think the grant that's on the table though from the FR, the operating grant, is what we really need to focus on.
Well, yeah,
Yeah.
That's what I meant initially. And if not initially, at least further down the road, if in fact we approve, you know, continuing on with the 3 and change. But I think we all agree that the state needs to play a role in this, that we need to try to get them to meet us halfway in this, if not more, to make this happen. Mayor, I'm sorry.
Okay. All right. Councilman Davis, do you want to?
I was just going to say, I think it'd be delightful if the state stepped in, but I'm not very comfortable making that assumption. The fact of the matter is that most of the political power in this state is in the northern part of the state. And that political power that's in the northern part of the state is really not very much interested in what happens down here, and is really not very interested, as far as I can tell, in the operations of the Port of Mobile. So I just don't know how much enthusiasm this restoration of this line is ever going to achieve in Montgomery.
Unless y'all do a train up to Huntsville. You might actually get some participation from the state if you should take your train from Mobile to Huntsville rather than to Jacksonville.
I would like to say, and then the mayor will get an opportunity to speak. David, thank you so much for coming. One, I had an opportunity for what, it was strange. I went to Fairfield Glad, Arkansas, and it was in the middle of nowhere. And I met a young lady, and she said, yeah, I was in Mobile, Alabama. I was like, really? What you was doing in Mobile? She said, it was for my honeymoon. Like a honeymoon in Mobile? Now I'm city councilman. I was just like, you decided to have a honeymoon in Mobile, Alabama. I think sometimes we really don't think about how great our city is. We have the Heritage House, who now was a national museum. We have a lot of great things. So let's not count our city out. We have a lot of great things taking place. And then we got to think about the quality of life as well. We always telling people that we want to allow young people to move back to our city. Well, the main thing is they don't have nothing to do. Well, sometimes giving them the opportunity to go to a Saints game on the app, on the train, creates a quality of life. So that's all a benefit. Mayor?
So right now, we know a whole lot more than we did an hour ago, at least from all the interaction. I want to remind us all of how this thing evolved. You know, Senator Wicker has always been, let's say, all in on this. And so there's never any question about where Mississippi stood. But there are 4 cities in Mississippi. It'd be very difficult for whoever was putting this deal together, you know, to deal with 4 cities plus New Orleans and plus the city of Mobile. And so Senator Wicker, you know, led that charge and everybody fell in line. If you go to New Orleans, Mayor Landrieu, you know, has been and now has been part of the Biden administration for the last few years, actually part of the DOT. And so to understand that that Senator Landrieu would be very much supportive of the rail line, thus the city of New Orleans and the state of Louisiana. In Mobile, it was a little more complicated because in Montgomery, Joel made a comment about, you know, the power structure in the state of Alabama. So my impression is that the governor realized that to do the negotiation, it needed to be the port doing the negotiation, not the governor's office, you know, because it was the port that was being impacted by this. And the governor's office does not understand all the interaction of what it takes to run the railroad, let's say, and get on the CSX line across it, whatever. So they, I will say, abdicated and they let the port, you know, do the negotiation for that part of the state of Alabama. Also, because we own the property, you know, they didn't want to try to negotiate for the city of Mobile. And so whether this was a slippery slope that we got on early, you know, I don't know how you would describe it, but I think that's how we got to where we are, okay? And because nobody else would step up at the federal level, you know, then we ended up, as been explained here, with the hand that's being dealt to us. To my knowledge, we really haven't asked the governor's office to participate. But, you know, there's several things in play here. One is that you've got a huge economic development opportunity that's going to happen from the port. I mean, none of us knew that you're talking about $70 million of infrastructure or the possibility of, you know, dual tracks pretty much between here and New Orleans eventually. And that's a game changer. And so we now recognize that that's that possibility. So it's an economic boom possibly for the state docks. And you've heard some speculation on what it can do for our tourism, okay? And so there are tourism dollars at the state level. And so my suggestion is that we can, knowing what we know today, you know, if we decide that this is something we should do, that we go to the state and see if we can't approach them on some basis of splitting this with us, because it really gets down to, we feel that it's not fair for us to put up all the money because the state's going to benefit from it, as well as the city of Mobile. So if that's what you would, you know, if that's what you would like to do, I certainly will see if we can't make those arrangements. But I want to make sure that if they say yes, then you know that I'm negotiating in good faith when I go see the governor to do that. So I'll be glad to answer any questions or have any suggestions. Take any suggestions.
Any of my colleagues have any questions for the mayor?
I think that's a great idea, Mayor.
Well, but we're trying to figure out how to get to yes. And the reason is that 4 years ago, when Amtrak, the port, and the freight carriers were trying to get together and work out all this agreement, I mean, there was no way we could predict what the outcome was going to be. But now they seem to be singing in concert about the opportunity. And so maybe we need to step up at this point in time. Thank you.
Well, what's the deadline on this?
I don't know. I mean, it's soon.
What's your timetable?
They said they're not walking away from it, so.
Yeah, we're not walking. I mean, we are ready to start. the construction projects now, but we can't do it without sort of the agreements in place.
So everything hinges on Mobile right now.
Well, Mobile, we're waiting to execute agreements with Louisiana and Mississippi too, but you're all sort of in the same sort of.
Do you have firm commitments from them?
Oh, yeah.
But you don't have a firm commitment from us, is what you're saying.
Yeah, sure.
Yes. All right, the mayor has something else.
I want to just make one more comment. In our negotiations, we've resolved all outstanding issues except for moving north of the convention center. And so let's say my support or my recommended support at this point in time has to do with the next 3 years is that be part of the contract is that it not go north of the convention center because that creates all kinds of other challenges for the port.
Any other questions from my colleagues?
Do you have a projected timetable? You guys have to. I mean,
Yeah, we were envisioning about 6 months worth of work.
starting when?
6 weeks from now.
Yeah, I mean, our original timeline was assuming securing the agreements this month with, construction activities taking place up to 6 months after that. So, the sooner we can get these agreements executed, the sooner we can start to do a groundbreaking and get things moving.
Did he say 6 weeks or 6 months?
6 months.
He said 6 months.
We
So
were
the goal-
anticipating the agreements executed in 6 weeks and then starting the construction, which is about a 6-month project.
So the goal for the deadline is in at least 6 weeks. That's a projected deadline that y'all.
Yeah, but there's not a.
I know it's not a defined deadline,
Yeah,
but
right.
that's the desire.
That's the desire, yes.
Okay.
Can I ask the mayor a question?
Yep.
Would this cause a strain to us over the next 3 to 4 years? Is it $1 million, whatever million dollars a year over the next 3 years?
Let's just say $1 million a year for the next 3 years. I certainly don't see that as being a strain.
And that's with everything else we have
Yes.
going on?
At this point in time, I do not see that as being a problem,
Do you think?
unless there's some major disruption in the economy.
Do you think it's recoverable any kind of way? I mean, I'm talking about through people coming in and sales tax, do you think we'll recover?
I'm comfortable at $1.5 million. I'm more comfortable at $1.5 million than I'm at 3. Does that hedge it?
Yeah, that hedges it.
Okay.
All right. So you think we'll be okay?
I think you're
If we
okay.
did it, we'll be okay.
I think so.
Okay.
Between the recovery from what you could get, let's say from tourism, plus the unmeasurable economic impact that accrues to the city of Mobile from the port.
I got something.
Councilman Woods.
I guess I understand the first 3 years I got it, $500,000, $1.5 million. I mean, I'm still stuck a little bit. Well, I mean, year 4, year 5, year 6. I mean, if we're still looking, and I know that there's a tremendous investment on the rail line, I guess I just feel like I need to say that year 4, 5, 6. I mean, that's what I'm worried about whenever all 3 of us have to split the $7 million deficit. So I don't know. I just want to just point that out that, I mean, it's, we seem to figure it out for year 1, 2, 3, and there is going to be tremendous investment. But, I don't know, sooner or later, we're going to have to address that year 4, 5, 6. So I just want to make that point.
And I agree with Councilman Woods. I think that's why it's so vital to start building those relationships with the state of Alabama and start showing the benefits and moving forward. Any other statements from my colleagues?
Just one
Questions?
thing,
Madam Vice President.
just again, on the year 4, 5, and 6 on 7. Once we get the state on board to go in half and they see what a great idea it is, then maybe they will continue to stay on board. And if not pay all of it, at least pay a good bit of it, half of it going forward for the outlier years. But let's give it a shot initially. Like the mayor said, it's better to have $500,000 a year rather than $1 million a year, even in the first 3 years.
All right. Do we have any other statements from Amtrak, Railroad? Okay.
Believe it or not, I have one more Amtrak colleague that came.
Good afternoon. I'm Todd Stennis. I'm Amtrak's Director of Government Affairs out of New Orleans. Live in Mississippi. But Councilman Daves, I want to point out that in 2018, you and the members of the council did submit a letter of request to the governor to fund the operating support for this service. I personally never saw a response back from the governor's office, but just for the record, you guys did make that request in 2018. So I don't know if that occurred or not. Councilman, you asked about people coming to Mobile. One thing I want to point out in the studies that have been referenced, the Southern Mississippi study, it was noted that 700,000 people a year come from foreign countries to the city of New Orleans. They don't leave the city because they're accustomed to taking transportation other than the automobile, just as a matter of record.
I understand that. We heard those numbers last time. I'm skeptical of how many of those international travelers that come to New Orleans for their vacation are going to take 2 days off to come to Mobile.
Well, again, it may be 2 days, but it also could be 1 day. It could be 5. You just never know.
One thing to note is in 2018, we hadn't found a flotilla yet.
All right. Do we have any statements from Amtrak Railroad administration?
The FRA. I'll just finish up unless the FRA wants to say anything. But I was prepared here today. We thought much of the discussion was going to be about the lease for the land, and there was an interesting conversation with you all because a lot of it was around the ridership and the revenue projections for the service and sort of what the long-term funding commitment will be, which is not unusual for the partners that contract with us to run trains. It's not, and it's generally what fills up most of my day. You had said something, sir, and I forget your name, but you're about living in Washington, D.C. and Amtrak's presence on the Northeast Corridor. I think in the northeastern part of the United States, when people think of Amtrak, they think of the Acela service, the electrified trains that we run there. Much of the rest of the country, they think of the long distance network, the overnight trains. They imagine themselves sleeping in a sleeping car, eating food in a dining car. The biggest service line at Amtrak, we'll carry 34 million people this year. My service line will be half of them. So I'm bigger than the Northeast Corridor and the long distance trains combined. The states that fund our services continue to see robust growth. And we have a really aggressive structure in the service line around ridership and revenue growth. And I just want to leave you with that. You don't have to take my word for it. But we're really aggressive working with the state partners around the country to help them achieve their transportation goals, but really to help them grow their ridership and their revenue. It was great to hear the hotel projections that are here for the city because I really believe we can do that. And just one other nuance here, but when we start the services, 2 daily round trips with the 3 cars and the 300 seats available per train, one of the great things about trains is you can add cars. And so, we will probably in the future, assuming that we realize our ridership projections here, be able to add capacity to this train and these trains just as we're in the midst of the largest procurement of a rolling stock in the company's history, and that will free up other equipment. We'll be able to increase the size of these trains and put more seats on the corridor and help you grow your ridership and revenue. So I just want to, there was questions about sort of the business model here. The model works. It's half of the company's ridership. We aggressively work with the partners to grow ridership and revenue, and we have tools in the future to help you continue to achieve those goals.
One last question.
Sure.
You mentioned the lease. You think would y'all accept the lease at $500,000 the first year? What, $5 million the second year?
I thought we were going to be talking about growth east and north of town.
That was a little fraud, man. That was a little fraud.
Thanks.
All right. Anything else from my colleagues? All right, we'll call this meeting. Okay.
So, Mr. Chairman, at this time, I'm asking the council to go into executive session to discuss a matter that deals with negotiation, dealing with city-owned property. lease.
All right, at least we're gonna do a roll call.
You get
Gonna make-
somebody's gotta
gonna make a motion.
Needs to come from the attorney.
So what I'll do is my name is Ricardo Woods. I'm the city attorney. I'm licensed to practice in the law, practice law in the state of Alabama. And I certify that this particular issue does qualify for executive session. At this time, I would ask for a motion to go into executive session along with the roll call vote and the meeting not reconvene afterwards.
So moved.
Second. All right, let's go and I'm just go around the table. Councilman Davis.
Yes.
Councilman Carroll.
Yes.
Councilman Wood.
Yes.
Councilman Reynolds.
No.
All right. Councilman Gregory.
Yes.
And then myself. Yes.
That's fine.
That's fine. Pass. So we'll go into executive session, not reconvene.